Welcome back to Deep Dive, down the rabbit hole of the financial industry. Today, we're opening up a pretty significant stack of sources, really digging into a massive global financial crime operation, and it was centered squarely in Germany.
Yeah, and this story, it really has implications far beyond just Germany, you know?
Yeah.
It feels like definitive proof that the whole Wirecard scandal, well, it wasn't just a one-off corporate mess.
Right.
It seems it was a symptom of something deeper,
Yeah.
a profound systemic vulnerability. And I mean, the sources point toward alleged internal corruption right inside Europe's fintech sector.
The sources we're looking at focus on this coordinated law enforcement action, Operation Chargeback, which sort of burst into public view in November 2025. Our mission today really is to understand why this scheme worked so well for 5 whole years, and importantly, why prosecutors are already calling it Wirecard 2.0.
And what's truly, I think, illuminating here is the scale. But it's not just the numbers. The findings really expose a kind of crisis of complicity.
Complicity. How so?
Well, it suggests this wasn't simply hackers breaking in from the outside. The evidence points towards the system itself being compromised from within by the very people paid to protect it.
Okay, let's start with those numbers then, because they are pretty incredible. The sources confirm this big coordinated action day led by the General Prosecutor's Office in Koblenz and the BKA, that's the German Federal Criminal Police Office.
Right.
They targeted 3 interconnected crime networks.
And the initial confirmed damages are just staggering. 300 million stolen.
300 million euros.
But get this, the attempted damages, what they were trying to get,
Over
750 million. Think about that gap for a second.
It's huge. And the victim pool. It's almost hard to believe.
Yeah.
4.3 million cardholders.
4.3 million.
Affected across 193 countries. I mean, you know it's truly global when the sources mention even North Korea was on the list of victim nations.
Wow.
That scope alone, it suggests an operation run with, like, military precision, borderless ambition.
It absolutely does. And for you, the listener, the stakes here are really critical. This cuts right to the core integrity of the whole European payment system.
Yeah.
It suggests that the entire ecosystem was, well, for quite a while, successfully exploited, undermined by a sophisticated, professional criminal machine.
Okay, let's unpack this. How does a fraud network steal 300 million over 5 years? We're talking 2016 all the way to 2021, without setting off massive alarms immediately.
That's a good question.
The sources detail this really sophisticated strategy. They call it low and slow micro-subscription fraud.
Right. So first, they needed the raw material, and that was stolen, card not present, credit card data, CNP data.
The kind you use for online shopping.
Exactly. Often bought pretty cheaply on the dark web, maybe after big retail data breaches, you know.
Yeah.
Then the networks took this stolen data and used it to activate something like 19 million fraudulent online subscriptions.
19 million subscriptions. But crucially, these weren't for, like, expensive stuff, right?
No, not at all. They mostly targeted services that, well, people don't pay much attention to. Things like obscure porn sites, maybe some dating platforms, niche media streaming services, stuff that easily gets lost in the noise.
And this is where the evasion strategy gets really interesting, isn't it? Exploiting psychology and the system's blind spots.
That's it exactly. Human psychology and institutional blind spots.
So tell us about these blind spots. Why low and slow? Why these tiny charges?
Okay, so they use 3 sort of interlinked tactics, really quite genius. First, the low component. The charges were kept small, consistently small. Sources mention recurring monthly charges of around 50 euro per month.
Wait, hang on. Only 50 euros? That seems, well, almost counterintuitive if you're trying to steal hundreds of millions.
Huh?
Why not just max out the cards?
Because of the security thresholds at the banks. See, that 50 euro amount around there was deliberately chosen to fall beneath the high scrutiny alert levels. Banks focus their fraud analysis on bigger transactions, right? Often anything under, say, 1,000 euro SIA might just get a standard review or less. If it's small and recurring, it looks like normal consumer behavior.
So they exploited the bank's own efficiency rules.
Pretty much. Then there's the slow component. That recurring subscription model, not a big, noisy, one-time theft.
That gave them longevity.
Exactly. A stable, long-term revenue stream for 5 years, all while staying consistently low profile. It's like the difference between a bank robbery and just quietly siphoning off pennies over time, but millions of pennies.
And then the final piece, the obscure component. So when you, the victim, actually looked at your statement, what did you see?
Well, you probably saw some vague corporate-sounding name, something you didn't recognize.
Right.
They leveraged what the sources actually call subscription fatigue. And it's true, isn't it? We all have so many subscriptions now. Streaming, software, whatever.
Yeah, 5, 10 different things sometimes.
So a small, unfamiliar €50 charge. It's easy to miss. Or maybe you think, oh, must be that free trial I forgot to cancel. Or, more likely, people just thought, ugh, it's too much hassle to dispute 50 quid.
So they exploited our collective inertia, basically, our tendency to just let small things slide.
Precisely. Designed to exploit that. Now, to handle the $300 million they extracted this way, they needed a serious back-end operation, an astonishingly robust infrastructure.
And the sources describe this as highly professionalized, almost like crime as a service. CaaS.
Yeah, that KVS model is key to understanding their resilience. The money laundering mechanism was huge, involved over 500 shell companies.
100.
Yep. Often set up in places like the UK or Cyprus, jurisdictions where transparency isn't always the highest priority.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. The criminal networks didn't necessarily register these themselves.
They just bought them off the shelf.
Pretty much. Bought prepackaged criminality. These specialized CaaS providers supplied, and I'm quoting here, complete corporate structures, including fake directors and all the required Know Your Customer KYC documentation.
Wow. So they outsourced their anonymity.
Exactly. Which makes tracing the real owners incredibly difficult for law enforcement.
Okay, so they had the cost for the fake companies, but they still needed a way to get the stolen money into the legitimate financial system to cash it out. This couldn't have worked without a bridge, right?
Absolutely not. The whole $300 million scheme depended on systematically misusing the infrastructure of 4 major German payment service providers.
TSPs.
German PSPs. And these are the merchant acquirers.
That's right. They're the crucial gateway. They're the ones who connect merchants, in this case, the criminal shell companies, to the Visa and MasterCard networks, making them look legitimate.
And we need to be clear here. We are not talking about some shady back alley operators. The sources name the firms involved and, well, it includes some absolute giants in European fintech. Yeah, this is the really uncomfortable part. We're talking about Wirecard, obviously, the one that already collapsed spectacularly.
Former flagship, yeah.
But also Payoneer, that's a major joint venture. Worldline and the Sparkassen Group. Then Unser, which used to be Heidelpay, backed by KKR. And Nexi Germany, formerly known as Concardis.
Wait a minute. So 3 out of those 4 are still huge active players today. It wasn't just Wirecard.
That's what the sources allege, yes. Payoneer, Unser, Nexi Germany all allegedly had their infrastructure misused alongside Wirecard's.
That feels like the most shocking part. Not just the usual suspect, Wirecard, but active major competitors potentially involved.
It definitely elevates this, doesn't it? From just a criminal problem to a systemic one. The industry was already shaky after Wirecard. Now, this investigation suggests, maybe, similar issues were widespread enough to touch multiple big firms at the same time.
And the investigation's most damning finding isn't just that the infrastructure was used, but this idea of a collusion crisis. It wasn't just passive exploitation by the criminals.
No, the allegation is active involvement. 6 key individuals were arrested. And these weren't low-level guys. We're talking executives, compliance officers, even an independent risk manager from these very German PSPs.
Compliance officers, the gatekeepers themselves.
The very gatekeepers. People paid, presumably very well, specifically to prevent this kind of fraud.
That's terrifying. So what exactly do the prosecutors allege they did?
The allegation is that they colluded with the fraud networks. Essentially, they helped them access the payment systems, waved them through, allegedly in exchange for fees for kickbacks.
So they acted as inside facilitators, bypassing all the checks and balances for a cut of the profit.
That's the allegation. A complete capture of the very function meant to ensure the system's integrity.
And this alleged collusion, it brings us straight to that explosive connection, the Wirecard echo. Prosecutors in Koblenz strongly suspect that the fugitive Wirecard COO, Jan
Marsalek, still out there somewhere.
Was involved in helping run this parallel global fraud network, which is why they're calling it Wirecard 2.0.
And the timeline makes it chillingly plausible, doesn't it? This network was running hot from 2016 to 2021, right when Wirecard was at its peak.
And the investigation seems to have kicked off just as Wirecard imploded in 2020.
Exactly. The implication is pretty stark. The criminal networks potentially fostered or enabled by Wirecard didn't just evaporate when the company collapsed. Maybe they just shifted. went freelance.
And used Wirecard's competitors as their new home, bringing their insider knowledge with them.
That seems to be the theory the prosecutors are working on.
Okay, so for you, the listener, maybe you've seen weird small charges on your own statements. Maybe you are even one of the 4.3 million. The big question is, what happens to the regular people? Do they get their money back?
We have to talk about the restitution gap here. And look, the outlook is pretty grim. The confirmed theft is 300 million. The seized assets the sources mentioned, over 35 million.
35 million out of 300 million. That's what, like 10%? A massive shortfall.
A vast 90% chasm. And given how sophisticated the money laundering was, remember those 500 shell companies, the CaaS providers, the alleged complicity of compliance officers?
Yeah.
The sources conclude it's highly probable that most victims will never be made financially whole.
So the money's just gone, vanished into that complex web.
It seems very likely. The authorities' focus now is on justice, on prosecuting the criminals they've caught, not really on distributing pennies on the dollar back to millions of individual victims across the globe. It's a harsh reality.
And that reality makes the name of the operation, Chargeback, almost cruelly ironic.
It really does. A chargeback, that's your main tool as a consumer, right?
Yeah.
It's designed specifically to get your money back if a merchant rips you off.
It's a safety net.
It's supposed to be. But the alleged internal collusion just completely broke that system.
Meaning the person reviewing the victim's dispute, the chargeback request.
Could have been one of the very people allegedly paid off to make sure the original fake transaction looked legitimate in the first place, using those fake KYC documents in shell companies.
So when you tried to use the safety net, the person holding it was maybe working with the thief.
That's the devastating implication. The system designed to protect you was potentially weaponized against you. And think about that number again, 4.3 million victims. How many just gave up on disputing 50 euros? It's a profound failure of trust.
Okay, the arrests finally happen in late 2025. Big headlines, public culmination. But the sources reveal this really critical timeline twist involving BaFin, Germany's financial regulator. What were they doing between 2021 and 2025?
Yeah, this is quite stunning. We have a direct statement from BaFin's executive director, Brigitte Rudolph, and she made it clear. BaFin, using things like business restrictions and prohibitions, they actually identified and completely shut down the fraudulent activities of these networks 4 years earlier.
4 years earlier, since 2021.
Since 2021,
Yeah.
according to BaFin.
So wait, the crime itself stopped in 2021, but the big public arrest only happened in 2025. That seems like a really long delay. Doesn't that risk the suspects disappearing, especially if the money laundering structures were still technically active?
That's a really sharp point. And the sources suggest this was actually a calculated strategic move. The 2025 raid was the public police action, arresting individuals whose criminal operations had allegedly already been neutralized regulatorily years before.
So BaFin sees the 4-year gap as a sign of their success. They cut off the money flow first, then moved in for the arrests later.
That seems to be their narrative. Isolate them financially, then bring down the hammer publicly. And BaFin is clearly leveraging Operation Chargeback now to justify a much tougher stance. A new, muscular, post-Wirecard enforcement doctrine.
You can definitely see that.
Absolutely. Look at the timing. Days after the chargeback arrests hit the news, exposing this alleged 300 million systemic failure, BaFin slams JP Morgan with a record 45 million fine.
For what exactly? Not related to chargeback, right?
No, completely separate. It was for systemic failures in submitting suspicious transaction reports, SARS on time. Bureaucratic compliance failures.
So they used the massive crime revealed in Chargeback to justify a record fine for a bureaucratic lapse at another huge bank. That sends a powerful message.
It really does. BaFin is basically shouting, failure to comply is now an existential threat. It doesn't matter if it's criminal collusion like in Chargeback or just sloppy paperwork like with the SARS. The tolerance is gone.
And this seems to be shifting towards what they call strict PSP liability.
Yes, moving away from that old defense of, oh, we didn't know what our merchants were doing.
The plausible deniability argument.
Exactly. The new direction seems to be, if you, the PSP, onboard a high-risk merchant, like these dating or streaming sites used in the fraud, and they commit fraud, the liability increasingly falls on you, the payment processor.
Regardless of whether you claim you knew or not.
Right. The burden of proof is shifting. You have to demonstrate rock-solid continuous compliance, not just ticking boxes on a form once.
And this whole low and slow method, it really highlights how outdated the old rules-based anti-fraud systems were, doesn't it?
Completely obsolete. If the fraud is specifically designed to duck under all the existing rules, like that €50 threshold, then just having more rules isn't the answer. The future has to be technology.
AI and machine learning.
It has to be. The mandate now is accelerated adoption of AML. Those traditional systems, if charge is above X, flag is, they missed 19 million subscriptions. The solution lies in more advanced network analysis.
Can you explain that a bit more? How does that tech fight this kind of crime?
Okay, so the crucial insight here is using something called graph AI, or network analysis technology. Think about it. A human investigator looking at spreadsheets. They can't possibly spot that 500 different shell companies registered across maybe 3 continents.
Yeah, impossible.
All share the exact same fake director signature from a CaaS provider, or use the same dodgy KYC document template. It's invisible to the human eye at that scale.
But the AI can see it.
But a graph AI system, it can map those hidden, non-obvious connections in milliseconds. It sees the patterns. It can instantly flag that entire cluster of 500 seemingly separate companies as one single, centrally controlled criminal entity.
Wow. So it short-circuits their whole outsourced structure.
Exactly. It bypasses the shell game.
So is graph AI the silver bullet then? Was the only real weakness of this incredibly sophisticated criminal setup the fact that they still had to rely on basically traditional fake documents and corporate structures?
That seems to be the vulnerability the authorities exploited here, yes.
Yeah.
The criminals bought anonymity, but they still had to connect the dots somewhere, and those connections left a digital fingerprint that the AI could trace.
Which demands a much more forward-looking, tech-driven regulatory response. And BaFin's actions since 2021 suggest they finally, maybe belatedly, got the message.
It certainly looks that way.
So wrapping this up, what does it all mean? Operation Chargeback feels like. Well, both a really damning indictment of a past era of compliance failure, but also maybe a necessary blueprint for the future.
I think that's fair.
And it definitely underscores how vital that international cooperation was. You had Koblenz in Germany, working with the U.S. Department of Justice, authorities in Singapore, all needed to take down this borderless threat.
Absolutely essential. And that leads us to the really crucial, maybe unsettling long-term challenge that you, the listener, should be thinking about. This Kublas model. It successfully provided completely fabricated corporate identities, fake directors, fake documents. That directly challenges the entire global Know Your Customer framework, doesn't it?
If criminals can just buy a convincing fake company identity.
Right. How can the financial system verify any business is legitimate if it's just relying on checking documents that might be expertly faked? It suggests we need to move beyond just looking at documents.
Towards what?
Maybe towards continuous, real-time, API-based verification. Or perhaps even mandatory digital identity wallets for businesses, something cryptographically secure. The provocative thought I'd leave you with is this. Can compliance, as we know it, ever truly win against criminal networks that operate like perfectly structured, outsourced, professional businesses using cutting-edge evasion tactics? It's a tough question.